Welcome to the Dirtbag State of Mind podcast from the Climbing Zine. I am Luke Mehall, and this is In Love with Climbing Part 2 with Sonnie Trotter. We released the first part of this episode last month, and Sonnie agreed to do a part 2. Every person I interview has a different style, different vibe. Sonnie, I could just talk to this guy forever. Just such an interesting person, great storyteller, humble to the core, and just a really interesting, fun person to talk to. So Sonnie has a new book, which was what kind of sparked this interview. It's called Uplifted. It's a beautiful hardcover book from Patagonia Books. And he also has a new podcast called Stronger Than You Think. As we talk about in the interview, it's more of an experiment than an official podcast, but little that he told me about it makes me very interested in checking out more, and hope you all will too. Over here at the Climbing Zine, we've got a couple exciting things going on. Volume 26 is about to be released. We have now edited all of our stories and just working on the photo captions part and getting the whole thing together. So that'll be out early next year. You can subscribe or pre-order at shop.climbingzine.com. And then we've also released a variety of new hoodies and shirts and stickers from the OG Dirtbag State of Mind design by Mallory Logan, our art director for the Climbing Zine. And you can also check those out at shop.climbingzine.com. This episode is sponsored by Kilter. Looking for a fun way to train at home or at the gym? Check out the Kilter board. Kilter board has innovative light-up holds, a progressive app, and animated functions with climbs for all abilities, and 2 layouts to choose from with large online communities for each. There are over 160,000 problems in the original Kilter board layout, and the largest full ride home wall layout comes with over 17,000 problems. You can set, tick climbs, make shareable playlists, watch send videos for motivation and beta, and even add your own videos to share with other users. Kilter has multiple wall sizes and package options available, so we can help get a Kilter board in almost any space. Check out Kilter at settercloset.com and look for more information in our show notes. This episode is brought to you by Osprey. Located just down the road from the Climbing Zine headquarters in Cortez, Colorado, Osprey is the leader in technical packs for technical pursuits. Osprey has an unwavering commitment to both conservation as well as sustainability. They are a pinnacle member of the Conservation Alliance, and 80% of their full-line product in spring 2025 are Blue Sign products. Also new for spring is the Transporter Liner duffels, built for hauling gear to the ends of the earth and back. Built with the lightest and most durable new Nano-Tough material made from 100% recycled materials. Visit your local retailer to find out more about Osprey or visit osprey.com. This episode is also sponsored by Scarpa. As many of our listeners know, I spent my last winter down in El Potrero Chico, Mexico. And this last winter, I was exclusively climbing in Scarpa shoes. The terrain of the limestone in Potrero is incredibly sharp, so it's a type of rock that really bites through the rubber on your shoes. And I was pleased to say that the 2 pairs of shoes that I used this winter totally held up and lasted me through the entire winter, and I'm still using them here back in Colorado in the springtime. I had the Instinct VSRs for a little more overhanging terrain or when I had to heel hook. And I used the Vapor lace-ups on more of the legendary, technical, small foothold type of terrain. Both of these shoes really lasted me well through the season. And if you'd like to get your own pair of Scarpas, check out scarpa.com. And we also have some affiliate links in our show notes that you can get a discount and score your own pair and support the Climbing Zine. Without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Sonnie Trotter.
So where are you calling from?
I'm in Potrero Chico. So I've spent this is my 4th winter I've spent here. Yeah.
Amazing.
It's kind of become like a second home to me.
Cool. Well, we'll celebrate it while it keeps going.
I really feel grateful that you were willing to do a part 2 with me. I feel like every time I talk to someone that I don't know for a podcast, it's like you're getting to know them through the podcast. And you were just so thoughtful and such a good storyteller that, we got about halfway through the timeline of your book. Anyway, since then, I've got a copy of your book. It's beautiful. It really is. Like, I am very impressed by it, and the fact that you combine just incredible photography with great writing, and then also as a hardcover, I'm looking at this book, and as a writer, I'm like, oh wow, I wish I could do something this beautiful. So,
Wow. Well, thank you so much for the kind words. To be honest, like I didn't actually have a lot of say in the layout and the final product. I mean, I did submit all the photos that, tried to accompany it, and they kind of, Patagonia as a publishing company, they kind of guided me along that path. But in the end, I didn't even realize it was going to be like a hardcover. I wasn't aware of that part until like kind of towards the end. And the feedback's been really, really, really warm, and really, I think Patagonia did this too. Like they wanted it to be something that when people bought, they didn't just like wreck it. I know all my hardcovers that I have in my home, like you protect them. And so I think that's part of Patagonia's philosophy, is to create something that people want to protect and keep for a long period of time. So appreciate that so much. Thank you.
I wanted to start off with a question from my good buddy Sean Matasavich, who is actually the publisher emeritus of the Climbing Zine. He's kind of the guy behind the guy. You had this famous quote that I think when we talked to you, like vaguely remembered it, was like, all I do is hangboard and do yoga. And was that in like an Anderson Brothers training book, like one of the earlier training books or something? Do you remember this?
Gosh, that's funny. I actually have the Anderson Brothers training book like right here in my little nook. I don't remember where that got published.
At least in my friend group, it's kind of this famous quote. My group of friends, we've always done yoga, and then hangboarding is probably a newer thing, but it didn't seem like that was like a thing you said a lot. It was maybe just something you said kind of offhand, or do you remember the context at all?
Yeah, there was a time where I worked really hard at just hangboarding, and I think it has to do with a lot of that when I'm not traveling or when I wasn't traveling. And my wife, we've been together for almost 20 years now, and she's always been a huge proponent of yoga. And so during the rainy months of like living in Squamish, when it just, there was long stretches of not getting out, that's all I was doing. I didn't have enough money to do anything else. We were just hanging out, hangboarding and doing yoga. And so I remember that era. I remember being interviewed for it. So if it is published in that book, that's probably where it came from. That has been a big part of long stretches of my winters, I suppose. In the summer, I try to get tired outside on rock, but definitely there's been long stretches of that.
Now, you did this road to 9A. Is that what it was with Tommy and Alex Honnold?
That's right.
And how did that turn out? I know you guys have put out some videos, and I've seen various things coming from Tommy and you and Alex. Is that something that has kind of rounded up for you guys, or?
Kind of. I mean, essentially, I did climb a route that was graded 9A. It was probably about 10 months after we kind of launched the game plan, the challenge. And then a friend of mine did come out with this guy Simon, really good climber, beautiful photographer, filmmaker guy. He's just a passion project. He just started like kind of documenting little tidbits along the way, and we were like, well, maybe one of us will do one, and maybe nobody will do one, and who knows? Because life is complicated right now. And I managed to get one done, and he put this like 3-part series of like an Alex segment, a Tommy segment, and a my segment. And so technically, I guess I did do the challenge. Tommy and Alex, I think Tommy ended up kind of getting busy with life. He ended up moving from one state to another and had to kind of pick a new project. He did this thing called Empath. This like used to be 15A, then 14D, and now with like hand jammies, I think they're calling it like 14C maybe. He's like, I'm pretty psyched I did my project. I just don't know if it's as hard as I wanted it to be. And then where Alex is, to be honest, I actually haven't checked in for probably at least 6 or 7 months on his progress. I haven't seen him up on the route that he chose for his challenge, although maybe now with all these new routes, maybe there's new ones that he has access to in the Nevada area, because you do have to choose something that's kind of conducive to your lifestyle. He's got 2 kids. He's doing tons of like probably corporate events and other expeditions, and so I think it gets tricky. Yeah.
Was there a challenge to kind of get fit for your project? I'm guessing you chose something up there in your neck of the woods.
I did. So I actually had tried a 9A in Squamish at the time. It's like relatively newer route, I guess. It's been climbed a handful of times, but the problem was I moved. My family also moved. We moved back to the Canadian Rockies, and so that spring, I did like 5 drives out to Squamish. I would try it for like a weekend, and then I would drive home for Monday. And it actually worked really well because it allowed me to train for 2 weeks in between, drive out, try it, come home, train for 2 weeks, drive out and try it, instead of a regular approach of like thrashing yourself at it every other day or taking a rest day, going back, and then like battling with skin issues. Because I often find at climbing at your limit, whatever it is, you deal with skin issues a lot. And so on that route, I would just try it. Before my skin would like get too beat up, I would come home and then train on like wooden holds and stuff. And so it worked out really well, actually. And I think I did it like mid-June, just before it got too hot. Got really lucky because I got a really nice weather window with a bit of a breeze, and then it got really hot, and then I got really out of shape that summer. So it was like this sort of like 3 to 4 month peak of the cycle, and then I got like the perfect weather window. So there is quite a bit of luck involved as well as preparation. But yeah, it was a fun challenge. I was psyched that we did that, because I think I leveled up more than I definitely would have on my own terms. I needed that extra push. It was super fun.
I love that, and I love the fact that you guys each have 2 children, and you're in a similar point of life, and I think that's really incredible. What was your training like to kind of level up? Were there new things you had to incorporate, or was it more of your kind of typical protocol?
I totally revamped everything. I kind of went old school, to be honest, because it's what I know and it's what's worked for me in the past. Whenever I needed my body to adapt to something that I like really wanted to do, whether it was like some beautiful climb or a big long road trip or something, I went back to hangboarding, bouldering, and then I went to doing these things called like repeaters on a hangboard. That was new for me. I've never used a hangboard for endurance work or fingerboard, like little edges. And so I did that. And then I also used the campus board on the smallest rungs with my feet on the bottom panel. And I would try to count as many contractions as I could. So I would basically roll up into a cramp with one hand, skip a roll up to another cramp. And it was like these ladders. I would just go up and down this ladder. And it was the most boring, repetitive work. Basically, my gas tank would run out at around 50 moves. But for this climb, I needed to hit 70. And it was very like reverse engineering type of approach. I just knew that I needed to expand my gas tank. And so I spent basically 2.5 months just going up and down this campus board ladder twice a week with a heavy pack on. And eventually I hit 70 repetitions, and then I did it like 2 times in a row, and then I did it 3 times. And then like 10 days later, I sent the project. So I knew that I couldn't just go to the gym with my friends and climb the way I normally like to have fun. I needed to do extra work. It became very clear that I wasn't in shape enough to do this route. I was strong enough, I just wasn't in shape enough. And I think that's hard for people to find time to be in shape enough. Like, I think some people, they say they need to get stronger, but they actually just need to get fitter. That was my case. And so that's what I did. For 3 months, I kind of just buckled down. It was hard because I'd hang out with my friends down at the climbing wall, but then I'd go back upstairs to do my workout. And then I'd come back down and say hi. And they'd be like, oh, try this boulder problem. And you're like, I can't. Like, if I get distracted, I'll never do this route. So I had to put the blinders on a little bit and treat it like something that had like a finite amount of time. And it worked. It paid off. I managed to level myself up, did the route, and then got incredibly out of shape like the next 3 months after that. So,
have you ever hit in a project like this one or another one? Have you ever hit that burnout, I'm not having fun phase? Because you definitely give off the vibe of you're always enjoying yourself. I think similar to Chris Sharma, you almost have this almost like Zen-like vibe where you just seem to always, you enjoy the nature of it. But have you hit points of burnout with projects where you kind of almost stop caring, or you have that kind of mental block? Have you ever hit that?
I've certainly been in periods of climbing where I just wasn't as motivated or fired up. And I still love the act of climbing. I just didn't have incentive to try very hard. There was a winter, for example, where our kids were still pretty young, and I think we were still in like full on parenting mode. And where my wife and I would go to the gym for 2 hours, like a fun 2 hour session before school was over, and it was kind of like our date day, and we'd go twice a week, and I would just do a bunch of 512s and maybe a couple of 513s, and then I'd be pretty tired, but I wouldn't be like worked. And then I'd just go home, and that would be like my day or my week. And then all of a sudden that turned into like months and months. And I realized I certainly wasn't getting any stronger. If anything, I was definitely getting weaker, but I didn't have anything in my mind that I was like, I'm a very visual person. So when I see a rock climb, like some pretty feature, that actually is what elevates me to try harder. Yeah, there's been periods where like, I guess motivation was just flat, but I very rarely have ever remember where my motivation was like dropping. Yeah.
And you've never had that? Because I do see that with especially maybe bigger, climbers that have to rely on sends, or I've had that myself of where I've just been like, I hate this climb, I'm over it. But that's cool. And do you think that there's a mindset kind of philosophy that you have to keep yourself from getting burnout, or do you just love being on the rock and climbing and it's a love thing? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a love thing. I think I'm pretty good today at like staying away from climbs that I'm not motivated for. Like, actually, I mean, I'll tell you a story. I was crack climbing quite a bit back in sort of my mid-20s. I was doing probably 50-50, like actually maybe like a third. I was like bouldering, sport climbing, crack climbing, maybe multi-pitch climbing a little bit here and there, but I was primarily doing single pitch and bouldering. And I got on this thing called Tricks Are for Kids, this 513 like ring lock finger crack in Indian Creek.
Oh yeah.
And it's so pretty. Like it's such a pretty line. And I saw pictures. I was like, I really want to go do that. And then we hiked all the way out there. It was like the day. We planned a whole day for it. And I get out there and I got like maybe like a third of the way up the route. And I was not having fun at all. I was like uncomfortable. I was in pain. And I was so bored. It's the same movement over and over and over for like 130 feet or whatever the route was, And I remember like looking up at the rest of the climb being like, I got to do this again and again. Like I literally just said, take. I didn't even like try hard. And I aided my way to the anchor and then I cleaned the route, and I never went back. And it's okay. There's a part of me that's like, why didn't I have fun on that? And I just never went back, and I was totally okay with that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when something moves you or it inspires you or you're pulled towards something and it works, I think that's where I like to exist. I think forcing myself to do things that I think I should enjoy, but I don't, is where I've gotten better at like losing interest and moving on to something that I'm truly, genuinely inspired by. So I hope that addresses that question.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking the one climb I did get burnt on was a repetitive creek climb. So maybe there's something about the monotony of some Indian Creek cracks or some crack climbs in general that can not inspire you, I guess.
Yeah, I think there is something there. Or like even on a sport climb or like even a boulder climb where there's like a move that you dread doing, you're like, oh, there's this shoulder move that I really hate or whatever, If that's the case, then it'll be this little thorn and it kind of eats at you a little bit. But I would say 99% of my climbing, I've chosen things that I've enjoyed the whole thing. Or maybe I've enjoyed 99% of it and there's like one tiny thorn that I managed to overcome. But overall, I definitely strive for routes that are more on the fun side for me, And like what's fun for us is not fun for everybody. Like, I get that, but I would say I like to play in that area of like, being real with what inspires me.
Absolutely. Well, since the last time we chatted, I realized you have a podcast now as well. Is that right?
Kind of. Yeah. It's a bit of a early phase experiment. We're going to see how it goes. But yeah, where I'm at right now is I'm training for my first 515. I've never really had the opportunity to try one. And well, I guess I've never created the opportunity. I got married, had 2 kids, and I just never really wanted to, move to like Spain or something like that and, live on these 515s. And there's now one in Squamish that I think that is sort of in my skill set. And I do need to increase my gas tank once again. So in that process and on the process of, this whole this 9A challenge with the other dads, I wanted to learn what other people were doing and what's working. I know there's a lot of literature out there. There's a ton of books like that Rock Climber's Manual that you referenced. And there's just a ton of information. There's a lot of different training, information online that's free that you could just but I really wanted to have these conversations with people like friends of mine. And I was like, what are you doing right now that you didn't do before? Or like what's new with all this technology of like measurable, all the science of like this tin deck things. And
what is tin deck?
It weighs the amount of pressure, the amount of pounds per force you can put on your fingers. And it's like you could travel with it. I don't own one, and to be honest, I've only played with one at a friend's house for 5 or 10 minutes, but they were saying that that you can travel with it. You can hook it up to like any fixed source, like a bolt in the floor, and then you basically like flex your fingers and you can measure like how strong you're feeling. There's all this new stuff, and I've never had a scientific approach to climbing. I've always been like, I just sort of look at the big picture, and I'm like, well, if I need to do 70 repetitions without falling and I can only do 50, I obviously need to get to 70. Like that's the way I've looked at it, or something along those lines. I've never really had a scientific approach to it, but I wanted to know generally what people were doing, like what friends were doing and what they've done in the past to get where they are. It was more out of a self-interest, this whole conversation thing, this podcast. And I also wanted it to be very short and concise, like 40 minutes type thing, where I tried to just break down like the 3 things that really get people, into the best shape of their life. So we'll see where it goes. I'm going to continue doing it. It's been pretty sporadic, but I do want to be more consistent. My goal was to hit 50 guests. So I'm at 7.
And what's the name of it?
I call it Stronger Than You Think.
Stronger Than You Think.
Yeah, I think sometimes people don't give themselves enough credit for how strong they are. I've worked with people, I've climbed with lots of friends, and myself included. I've done things I didn't think I could do because, a little bit of a different perspective, mental shift from a friend or that type of stuff. And so I think it's kind of a hopeful title. I think everybody wants to be a little stronger than they think they can be.
Absolutely. So. And who are the people that you thought of right away that you wanted to talk to? I saw you recently had Josh Wharton on there. I think he's kind of the ultimate undercover crusher guy. Who were some of your other guests?
Yeah, well, I have a list of I probably have a list of 100 people I want to talk to. And then, finding the time and nailing it down are 2 different things. But yeah, I've talked to Babsy and Jacopo Larcher. That was really great. I talked to Connor Herson. I did a great podcast with Josh Muller as well, who's a Canadian Calgary, V14 boulderer and climbing gym owner and coach. I've also talked to Matt Samet, who's now in his 50s, but also climbing the hardest he's ever climbed, still a 14 plus, climber. He's recently done some 14As and Bs that are really hard. So it was really cool getting their perspective. I definitely want a range of, teenagers to older climbers. And I even want to talk to, I'm inspired by older climbers from the 90s, like Yuji Haraya, even Francois Legrand, whose son now is a 9A climber. And I want to kind of get their take because they were World Cup champions back in the early 90s. They were climbing very, 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 very hard for that era. And they didn't have access to all this technology and science. And so I'm kind of well, what were they doing? And I kind of do know what they were doing because I remember reading articles in the magazines. But I'd love to hear it from them about what it was like to train at that time. So I want kind of a full range of conversations from teenagers today who only want to board climb to people like Yuji and Francois who train for World Cups, but then also traveled around the world on all different types of rock. So I've always wanted to be sort of a well-rounded climber. I guess I want these conversations to be well-rounded conversations too.
I generally avoid most climbing media because I'm grading it all day, but this actually sounds like something I would listen to because you're kind of nailing that sweet spot of we are stronger than we think, and then how do we learn? You have access to probably all these people that you know throughout the years, so that sounds really interesting. Do you have a couple takeaways that are thematic throughout the interviews that you've done so far?
I would say the main theme that I've gathered is training safely. I think as we age or as we pile on years and reps on our joints and stuff, I think we have to be a little bit smarter with how we approach training. And that's been an interesting thing, is like learning how people are adapting to continue improving, but in a way that's not so damaging to the body. Like one example is Matt Samet's got this exercise that he learned from a few coaches that operate in Boulder, and they're doing this thing called like weighted lowers, where I've never heard of it before, really. I've heard of weighted pull-ups. We've all seen people doing massive feats of strength with weighted chin-ups. But what he does is he steps off this bench in the lock-off position. So he's already up to his chin or his shoulders, but he's got a heavy weight. And then all he does is put on the timer, and he does a 1 minute lower. So he goes from his chin basically to straight arms dropping down. But it's 60 seconds long. And he said it's like the most painful 60 seconds of your life, because you're like, your elbows will be shaking and stuff. But he said after doing that for like a block, he would get back on like a moon board or whatever. And he said he had so much more pop. And so what's interesting is that he got power from doing this like slow, heavy 60-second. Like it just seems so counterintuitive that would create more power in his pull-up when you're driving upwards for a new hold. But he said he had a lot more shoulder control and power in his lats. And so I was like, wow. So that's like something that's safe, that is counterintuitive, that I'm adapting. It's that type of stuff. You know what I mean? And hearing people's injuries of like bearing down on razor blades when you're 20 years old and just over and over, and kind of like not giving your fingers enough time to recover, and they get kind of gnarled. So that would be like another one, is like, when you're doing really aggressive grip strength stuff, you give your fingers grace and time to recover and heal so that you can have a stronger day instead of negative returns. And yeah, so it's things like that. It's just learning how to be a bit smarter and trying new things that are working for people.
I love that. That's great. There's just so many new exercises now, and it seems like there'll be a trend that goes off. I feel like the no hangs I've started to do those recently, where you're.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your opinion on that, because I don't do any no hangs, but it seems like it's gaining a lot of momentum, and
I just had a buddy who recommended it in Durango, and he's one of the strongest boulders in Durango, and he told me about it. I'm like, well, that sounds silly. And you're just strong, you just do that. And then I just kept hearing more and more really strong climbers talk about no hangs, and saying it's very chill. And so I started doing it, and I just enjoy the stretch too, almost. But I've felt significant, maybe around the 3-month time period, I've just felt a significant difference of getting pumped on certain routes here in Potrero that are like either gently overhanging or a little bit overhanging. It's felt great for me. I started hangboarding just in the last 2 or 3 years, and repeaters and different things like that. And I've started to have my hardest sends in the last few years as well. And so I'm just trying to keep looking for little different things and enjoying the workouts. But there's something about no hangs that even just the stretch, like even if it didn't help my climbing, I feel like it's beneficial, because you're just stretching out your lower back so much. And kind of, my yoga teacher always says is like, if you have your armpits out, you're not going to be depressed. Kind of an interesting quote from her. She just said that recently. Like, oh, that's so great. She's like 76 years old. But yeah,
that's awesome.
It's just another one of those things that, like, once I've incorporated it into the routine, you can do it once, or I think you're supposed to do it twice every day. The guy who made it famous, the Emil guy,
right,
does it twice. He had a very scientific protocol, but I mostly just do it once. It's kind of difficult to get it twice in the routine per day. But I've just been doing it once a day.
Yeah, it's 2 training sessions a day is really hard for most people.
Totally. But it's like 10 to 15 minutes to do a no hang workout.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that short.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Interesting. Wow. Well, I mean, I do realize that like so many things will work if you're consistent at it, right? Like I think when we create these new, these new exercises or protocols, and then we get consistent with it because we're like, oh, I'm going to try this thing. But you can't just try it for like a week or 2 weeks. You got to try it for 3 months, 4 months. And when you do that, when you commit to that, of course things are going to start to work because it's more about the consistency, I think, rather than the actual protocol, for example. That's my belief, because I think we've been doing things differently in the past, but when you do it with consistency, it's still going to have benefits. I've been listening a little bit to like Dave McLeod. He's kind of in the same camp. He's like, it seems like it's kind of 50-50 right now for him. Maybe I don't want to speak for him, but like the wording that he was using was kind of like, maybe it's because of this or maybe it's because of that. Like all of the variables aren't accounted for yet. So I think as time goes on, we'll maybe get more and more scientific about it. But I guess everything can work if it works for you. You know what I mean? I know what I do, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. I just know that it works for me. And so, like, who's to say if it's right or wrong? I don't know. I'm not injured. My grip is as strong as probably it's been in a while. I just keep doing it. I'm not about to change that right now and try something new. And I think that's where a lot of us kind of get caught up, is we bounce from one shiny idea to another without giving some foundational stuff consistency it deserves.
Well said. Well said. Well, learning more about, we didn't quite get there in the first interview, so learning more about where you're at right now is definitely very inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. Sounds like you're crushing it. You're stronger than ever.
And I'm enjoying it too. I've kind of just switched to sport climbing. I've kind of lost my head for trad climbing and different things. I've had, variety of reasons for certain things, but yeah, just gravitating to what I enjoy, and yeah, the passion is still burning for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, now that I have the book in hand too, I think it's so cool how you write about your wife and how you met, and I think that's sometimes missing in a lot of, like, I don't know, climbers writing about their lives, is they either have a significant other and they're important to them, but they don't write about them, or it's just I conquered the mountain kind of thing. But what's so interesting with you is you seem to have met your wife when you were like in the middle of your dirtbagging. I think it's some of your best writing in there that I've read. I just like how, you're described meeting this cute girl, and then she has a boyfriend, and then you're living in different places, and you're like, how is this ever going to work? But was that just kind of a no-brainer to you to kind of include your story about how you met your wife and your journey with your life for the book? Or was that kind of something that was recommended, or how'd you arrive at that place?
I wouldn't say it was recommended, no, because I actually didn't get a lot of direction when they're just like, here's the timeline. You got whatever it was, 18 months to write this book or something. And they're like, let us know if you have any questions. And then they just kind of like handed it off to me. And then they're like, submit a rough draft in 18 months and we'll take it from there. And so I was really left to my own devices, I would say, with that writing process. And then I knew that the thing that we had talked about was sort of this arc of a climber's journey, like how you discover it, how you move through it, you evolve, you're inspired by the community around you, and then life starts to change a little bit. You have these pivotal moments, and then I was already a father when we agreed to write the book, so they wanted sort of this tie-in to, like, now that you're a father, how has your perspective changed, and now that you're raising kids? And so when I thought about the most pivotal moments in my life, that was absolutely one of the most pivotal moments. I mean, it was a no-brainer for me. I knew she had to be included. I just didn't know how. As I kind of started working through it, I guess I was like, well, this is kind of its own chapter. And I do feel insecure about it sometimes because it is this little love story, I suppose, that was complicated at first. I think a lot of relationships are very complicated at first.
Especially the climbing ones.
The climbing ones can be very
when you live in different places, for sure, yeah.
Or sometimes it's a small community. Sometimes you know people, and it can be not an easy thing to navigate sometimes. There's a huge component of luck involved with the two of us kind of coming together. And also, I want to see where this goes. I guess it's like another example of sort of taking a bit of a risk. I moved from Squamish to Canmore to try to nurture the relationship. Like I knew if I just stayed in Squamish and we just saw each other a few times a year, it was never going to work. I just knew that. I guess it's an example of like taking a risk. And so I did include it, and it became its own chapter. And 20 years later, that risk has still been fruitful. So I feel very fortunate that it's worked out. So yeah, I knew it had to become kind of a pivotal moment. Discovering climbing was a pivotal moment. It probably is for most of us who read climbing literature. Relationships become pretty pivotal moments. You know, injuries or close calls become pivotal moments. Children, moving locations to climb, taking a new job that's like in a climbing area, like anything that we do that is sort of guided by our love for mountains, love for climbing, and trying to build a life around it is pivotal. And so I just knew that for better or for worse, I had to include it. So,
well, and I'm glad you did. And I think maybe that's why other people maybe don't write about that stuff, because it is kind of the most vulnerable we are is loving, you know, another person. Was that something at that age that you thought you were looking for, was like getting married and having kids? Was that a strong drive for you, or was it something that more naturally kind of progressed?
Very fortunate to have really awesome parents. I remember being like 20 years old and being like, I started looking at my parents less like authoritative or like guides, as more like just people and friends. And I remember going through that transition as a teenager into like my early 20s and being like, wow, despite some conflicts and stuff, my parents are just cool people. And I feel very lucky to have that. And I think in my teenagers years, when other friends were like, oh, I'm never having kids, they're super annoying or whatever, I was like, I think kids are awesome. And I remember thinking it'd be awesome to have kids. And then when my wife and I got together, she's got four siblings, and she openly talked about having kids. I guess it naturally evolved, but we both knew that we wanted a family. And if it didn't work out, that was okay. Like it's totally fine if it doesn't work out, but we were willing to try. And I think we were both in that boat pretty early on. I guess it was an evolution. It wasn't like something that was like, I have to get married and I have to have a kid. In fact, right before we moved in together, before we kind of, I guess, committed to trying, I remember having a talk with my dad because I was like planning another climbing trip. And I was like, yeah, I just don't think I'm the type of person who needs to get married, or, I remember having that thought, or like, I just wanted to go climbing, and relationships were kind of, I guess, based on a little bit of convenience in my teens and early 20s, I suppose, because you end up dating people who are near you, around you, and you try things out, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But I remember kind of like being like temporarily giving up on relationship. I was like, I think I'm good. I just need to go and travel for a little bit. And then things elevated with Lydia, and then we kind of moved in together pretty quickly. And then I was like, oh, I see a different way. I see a different path. It changed very quickly. And it's interesting that like when you walk away from the outcome, sometimes things happen. It's kind of very similar to like rock climbing. When you're like, oh, I have to do this route, it's really important to me. But when you kind of let go of the outcome and you're like, well, I love this route, I'm going to keep trying it. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And sometimes that's when you actually send the route. But when you hold on to the idea of sending the route so tightly, sometimes it becomes harder to send. And I felt like that happened to me with relationship. I kind of was like, well, I do want to be in a relationship. I love being in a relationship with someone. But when I kind of let go of it, that's kind of when it actually ultimately happened. And so I just found those parallels kind of interesting.
Very well said. I knew this would happen with you, as I've got a lot of things written down, but I want to kind of finish with some Mexico stories because I'm in Mexico, and last night I read through your logical progression story, and I know you've got a pretty hard first ascent here too. Is it Battle Royale or?
Yeah, I think that's an old Kurt Smith route.
Was it? Okay, yeah. So yeah. I want to chat a little bit about Mexico, but
okay.
Since we're on the topic of family, I loved your line how you're like, well, there's no bath time in Yosemite. Like when I hang out with my friends, like, yeah, we go over, we have dinner, and then I go home when it's bath time. What were those days like to you, where you're dirt bagging it with the family?
They were awesome. I mean, my wife is a climber, a bit of a free spirit at heart. Like, she loves to travel. She's so open-minded. She just loves to be in the moment. And so it was awesome. I mean, I think if we had a different relationship to camping or dirt bagging or climbing, traveling, I think it would be harder, but we're very similar, In Yosemite, there is there's like a shower there. You can it's funny because you're like carrying this little toddler and you're like you have to shower with them like in your arm, and you have to be very careful, and it's just like a totally different approach, and it's a whole thing to like pack them up from wherever we are and then do this whole thing. You don't just zip over and have a quick shower. It's an event basically. And so it was awesome though. I mean, we always made it work. It's a priority to be in the valley. It's a priority to like be with our community, our friends that are there, and you just suck it up. You just do the things you have to do to make it work. And it's, maybe the climbing is a smaller part of the whole picture because of the amount of time it takes to parent, to cook, to clean, to do all the things, but you're still there. Like, nothing gets done if you don't show up. And so we knew that if we wanted to do the things we wanted to do, we had to be there. And that just comes along with all that extra stuff at the time. But gosh, I mean, I've never regretted a single second of it.
Because I'm sure some parents are listening to this. What were some of the most difficult challenges of deciding to live like that for a time period?
You're just generally more tired because you're out climbing. It can be cold or windy, and then you come in and you're like, oh my God, the dishes are all stuck. You're like, I got to scrape the macaroni and cheese off the pot before I can clean it. So there are things like that are just not convenient. And I think just there's like a level of fatigue, I think, that can kind of sit in because you're like, I'm so tired from trying my project or whatever, climbing all day in the cold and wind. And then you're also trying to like live a kind of a domestic side as well. And it's just not easy. I suppose maybe that was like the hardest part. But also our kids were quite young. They were, 3.5, and we left on that trip. She was like, our daughter was like 7 months old. She was just this tiny little bundle that we would just wrap up and put on our chest or put in the pack. It just wasn't a big deal. But I think as they got bigger and older, and I have friends who've tried to do it with a bit older kids for long periods of time, I think it gets a little bit more challenging in other ways. They have their own ideas of what they want to do with the day, or they push back a lot. They're like, I don't want to go to the crag today, like that kind of thing. And you're like, okay, that's fair. But we had this like sweet spot where as long as they were with us, they didn't really care at all where they were going. It was awesome. So I think we had a little sweet spot. We've done a lot of trips since then, and we've gotten more of that. They're tired. They want to see their friend, or they're a bit of pushback. And we compromise. We're like, okay, well, we'll do this today, and then tomorrow we'll do this thing for you guys. At that period of traveling, it was much easier in that way. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I think the fatigue is probably the hardest part, but it's overshadowed by this incredible experience that you get to have. I mean, when I look back at videos and photos of taking our kids to the waterfalls and running through trails and stuff like that, and through snowstorms, like, it was so cool. And we saw all the national parks and state parks. I mean, yeah, it's just an experience that cannot be easily replicated or duplicated. Like, so it's getting harder now. They're bigger, more expensive. And so we're trying to plan 2027, 2 to 3 months in Spain. That's what we're working and saving towards now, is a big family adventure for 90 days in Europe. We'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Maybe you'll get your second 515A.
We'll see. We'll see. I don't know if that's going to be long enough, but we'll see.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that'd be sick though. That'd be sweet.
When I talked to Sharma, he's like, yeah, sometimes I have a hard time finding partners. I was like, wow, what a world. That it was probably also for his like 8-pitch 514 he's working on or something. So Sharma's looking for partners.
I get that though. I mean, one of the hardest parts of having kids is that you're on their program, and then when you get a window, you try to make the best of it. And sometimes your window doesn't align with all of your favorite climbing partners. That's all. I get it. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so since I'm in Mexico, you've got a pretty well, it's like I don't think it ever gets climbed, but people know about it. Battle Royale on Club Mex. How did that project kind of come about, or was it something that went down pretty quickly? Because I know it was like an unclimbed 513 plus for a long time. That if Kurt Smith couldn't do it, he was a pretty impressive climber during his Potrero days, and has several hard 513s here. Was it a project that just kind of came about, or how did it all kind of go down?
I don't remember how I first heard about that climb. It was my first trip to Potrero. I don't know if it was either in the guidebook or if someone had like told me about it. It was like, hey, you should go check this thing out. It's beautiful. It's tall. It's still undone, and it's right there. But one way or the other, whether it was the guidebook or word of mouth, we went up to check it out. It wasn't in spectacular shape. I mean, we broke a number of holds, and one in particular was actually, I have this memory of it. I mean, it's going back more, 22 years or something. But like, I had this moment where we were up on the wall, and then we got up there early, but slowly people started coming to Craig at the base. Like it gets kind of popular down there. I didn't really factor that part in, but all of a sudden I'm like questing between bolts, trying to unlock these sequences, and I lunge to this like finger lock, and it just like cracks under my pinky finger. The rock separates under my pinky, and I'm like stuck in this sprawled out super starfish position. And this chunk of rock like breaks off in my hand basically. And I knew that as soon as I let go of the finger lock, the whole dagger was going to rip out of the wall. And I'm like literally above 20 people. It was just like a horrible moment. I remember planning this, but I basically like let go of my other hand first so that I could reach over as I was falling in midair and grab this dagger. And I took like a 25-foot whipper, clutching this dagger like a football. Like I held it and I pulled it into my chest, and I took the fall. And then I'm like hanging on the end of the rope, and I've got this like, it was like football size, but it was like pointy on the ends, kind of like a dagger on both ends. Yeah. And I'm like swinging around with this, being like, what do I do with this thing now? And I got lowered, and I traversed way over to this ledge, way off to the side, and perched it on the ledge. And it's probably still sitting there now to this day. So yeah, there was moments like that where it was like kind of sketchy. And then some of the smaller crimps kind of broke off. But I think it was the third day. I want to say it was the third day I sent it, maybe the second or third day. But I went up with 2 different people for sure, and then maybe it was the third day that I sent it. So yeah, it was awesome, to be honest. Like overall, it was just a really fun climbing experience. I remember when you get to the summit, you're on like a fin of rock. Like the whole thing is like this giant fin. And when you get to the last pitch and you like literally climb to the summit, like to the skyline, you can like straddle this piece of limestone, and you can like see the ocean on one end, and you can see the whole canyon of the Potrero on the other side. And you're on this like, it's like you're sitting on top of a horse or something. And it's so cool how thin it was at the very top. And it was just like a really cool place to be. So yeah, I don't know if it gets climbed much anymore. I think it's been repeated at least once, but it is a little weird now that the base of it's getting so much more popular.
Ironically, I just put up a route just to the right of your 2 routes, actually, 2 cragging routes just to the right of it. I've never seen anyone on it, the upper pitches, but the first pitch gets climbed a little bit, like the 12A or whatever. And then, yeah, I put up two 511s just to the right of it.
Okay, yeah. Cool.
So whenever your name comes up, every once in a while, I'll be like, oh, yeah, this is that Sonnie Trotter route or whatever, and people get psyched.
So, sweet. I'm trying to remember who it was. People were asking me about it. I get emails and DMs sometimes asking me for a beta or whatever. I just don't know for sure if anyone's officially repeated it or not. But gosh, yeah, I hope so. I mean, Kurt put a lot of work into it, and it's a beautiful route. Yeah, but I get it. It's way up there. It's a big wall. I remember, actually, I'll tell you a quick story. It was like the first time I ever got caught in like a wind, these like windstorms that kind of like they circle around inside the canyon. And so it was like really calm, and I remember from breakfast like having to pee really bad. And so I'm on this ledge, with my climb partner Al, and I start peeing on the side, and then I could see the wind like moving across the wall, and it's about to hit. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I didn't want to stop. And so I kind of just like risked it. And gosh, it was quite the shower. It just swirled everywhere, and we were all laughing about it. But yeah, that was my first sort of peeing on the wall, peeing on my partner experience.
Yeah, everyone's got that story. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that, Al. He was a good spirit about it. Yeah. Yeah.
I did want to try to ask you some stuff about logical progression, but maybe that'll have to wait for our next one because we're kind of closing in our time period. But as a final question, I just think you, Tommy, Chris Sharma, are just in my minds because I started climbing in 99 and reading the magazines and seeing your names. And it's just so cool that you guys are all around living like balanced lives now. You've seen a lot of changes in climbing, and you seem to be, really healthily engaged with the active climbing and training and community and just, all the good things about climbing. You seem to be kind of on a positive side of it. Do you have any vision or like what you hope that people get out of climbing and continue to get out of it as it kind of changes and, has different aspects to it? Do you have any words of wisdom or hopes for the continued evolution of the sport?
Wow. I don't know if anyone's ever asked that before. The first thing that comes to my mind is no. Like I don't have any vision for the sport for anybody else. I think it's a very personal thing. I will say that when V17s get climbed quickly and I get excited about it. I'm like, wow, that's freaking amazing. Like I'm still super inspired by Olympians and people out there putting up new routes, finding new boulders that are like the gem of the gem, like really pretty. I still take screenshots of like beautiful boulders that I've never seen before that might be in some new developed area in Japan, and I see this beautiful boulder and I'm like, oh my God, and I'll screenshot it because like I'm super inspired visually by the way that boulder looks and the way it climbs. So I mean, for me personally, I think I'll always be attracted to the way rock looks and feels to move over. I think I'll always want to be relatively in shape so that I could try as many of those rocks as I can, given the time I have on Earth and the ability to travel if I can. So I don't think that will ever change. I don't think my why will ever change. But I don't really have a vision for how the world should embrace climbing or how it should change. I'm glad people are discovering climbing. I think it's cool now that we could talk about it more openly and like the general public knows what we're talking about, because back in 98, 99, when you tried to talk about rock climbing, it did feel like, I think I wrote a line in the book where it felt like this undercover club, this underground club where it was kind of hard to talk about. And I think it's cool now that my nephews are into climbing, like they live on the other side of Canada now where I was raised, but they're getting into climbing, and like it's just becoming so much more understood and accepted and enjoyed. And I think that's a really wonderful thing. So yeah, I don't really have an overarching vision for it or thought. I enjoy being a part of it and seeing where it goes and how it unfolds. And I'm, honestly, I'm just really grateful that I found it when I did. And I'm glad that I was able to make some sort of contribution to it.
Well, that's a great answer. And yeah, congrats on your book. And yeah, just thanks for being a real positive spirit in our community and speaking personally, just an inspiration for those of us in our mid 40s that there's still a ceiling that we're reaching for, so thank you personally for that. And I hope your kiddo feels better. Yeah, I'll be following along and listening to your podcast and seeing how things kind of go with your own climbing and yeah.
Terrific. Well, yeah, reach out anytime. Thanks so much for inviting me here. I hope some people enjoy it, and yeah, keep crushing it down there in Mexico. You're very lucky to be down there. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of a gray bird day, and then it's supposed to start getting slowly nicer. So I got a project that like gets a ton of sun. So like these gray bird days are perfect. So I'm excited to kind of get on the
killer.
project this afternoon. So
Good for you. Enjoy it. I hope you have a beautiful season. That
thanks,
sounds
brother.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
All right.
take care until next time.
You too. Peace.
All right.
All right, that was my conversation with Sonnie Trotter. Immensely enjoyed that. Like I said at the top, his new book is called Uplifted, The Evolution of a Climbing Life from Patagonia Books. Big congrats to Sonnie for getting that done and for the folks at Patagonia Books for getting that out. You can check out his podcast, Stronger Than You Think, on YouTube, and I'm assuming it's available on some other platforms as well, but I think it's mostly getting pushed out in YouTube. As I said at the top, volume 26 is about to come out in January, and you can order a copy of that or subscribe to the zine at shop.climbingzine.com. And we also have a new line of Dirtbag State of Mind shirts, hoodies, and stickers, and you can check those out at our shop as well. If you'd like to sponsor the podcast directly, you can go to patreon.com. And whenever you sign up, we'll hook you up with some zines and stickers. And it's a good way to support the podcast directly. And this is our final episode for the year and the season. And it's a joy to create this. I say it all the time. It's the favorite part of my job. You know, just getting into an interview and just sitting in it and having the joy of being asked an accomplished climber or just an interesting climber, you pick their brain for an hour, and I love it so much. So I appreciate you all for listening. Music from this episode is by Devin Dabney. Our digital editor and producer is Chad Rich. And signing off from Potrero Chico, Mexico, I'm Luke Mehall. Peace.